from a business standpoint, it's really opened up my eyes. It's like, okay, I can do this. My name is Leslie, and I am in Salt Lake City, Utah, in the United States. And my day job, if you will, is I teach at a local law school here at the University of Utah. Really what led me to all of this is sort of like, okay, you're teaching law. Like, how do you get into natural skincare? I have two girls, 7 and 9. And I've generally always been very natural minded focused. So anything I can get from the ground, does it come from a plant? This is so great. And so I've always been mindful of that. But what really propelled the entrance into finding the School of Natural Skincare, my youngest just tried out last year for a competitive dance team, and she made it. We're super excited. She's 7, right? And so as they're getting ready to do all of the competition stuff, they send out this informational to the parents. They're like, okay, well, here's their competition sort of checklist in terms of makeup. And I was like, oh, my 7-year-old, like, she does play makeup, but I was like, I don't really love that. And to really get, clean makeup is expensive. And I'm just a DIYer by heart. Like, if I can figure out how to make it, like, that is my jam. Like, I love it. And so I've just always been that way with my family. So I just thought it would be fun. I was like, I'm just going to figure out how to make this. So when I started, found some like mica powder and like arrowroot starch, right? It was like some DIY recipe like online. And I'm like, oh, this is so pretty, right? So I made this whole thing for her, presented to her for Christmas. She loved it. It's crumbling. It's all over the place. But I'm like, but look, it's so beautiful. So then when the competition stuff started coming around, I was like, let me figure out how to like really do this. And I came across a DIY sort of makeup book, and I started reading that, and I was like, oh, that's interesting. That's interesting. And one of the reference in there led me to School of Natural Skincare. So I was like, oh, what's this? And I started looking at the blogs. And so I kind of hung out on the blog for a while. And then, there was like, you can enroll in this skincare. And I was like, huh. And I was like, I think I really want to do this so that I can get off of the recipes online and actually know how to create some of these products really tailored towards my daughter. So that's kind of how I got started. So I started with the Diploma for Natural Skincare, and the makeup was sort of in the background. And what propelled me there was actually a friend from church was telling me that she purchases, and it actually became one of my benchmark products, but she said she purchases this particular face cream because we were talking about tallow and the use of tallow. And I was like, I'm finding tallow. I love tallow. I'm trying to like figure out how to work with it. And she was like, oh, I buy this particular cream that has tallow in it from this other company. And I was like, really? So at this point, I had kind of started into the course just to sort of learn. And then she introduced this product to me. And I remember looking at this product and I was like, I could totally make this. So that kind of led me down the Diploma for Natural Skincare path. And it was really like, let's see where this goes. But I'm looking at stuff that like my friends are using. And again, DIY extraordinaire. I'm like, let me see if I could do that. Let me see if I can do that. So that kind of led there. But then it still also merged into my daughter, because now that we're putting the makeup on her, as I'm trying to learn how to make that, I'm like, now we need to get this makeup off of you. So thinking about, a natural makeup remover. So that experimentation sort of led down that. So the vision now has sort of become thinking of my target audience, really thinking about, young dancers or just dancers, athletes, performers rather, that need to wear makeup or need to really protect sort of their skin, aligned for them, right? So yes, you have to put this on. Let's put something on clean. Now you need to take it off. Let's clean it off with something clean. Let's rehydrate with something that's very intentional and purposeful for your skin. So everything is sort of like merged into this. This would be fun. I could totally do this. Oh wait, this has a purpose. And that's kind of where I found myself. So my youngest daughter, her name is Nia. In Swahili, it means purpose. And so we named the line Nia Natural Beauty with the tagline of beauty with purpose. And so I personally have never really worn makeup. But then since starting with Nia and with my daughter and like trying to make stuff for her, I really learned more about the purpose behind various ingredients, right? And the magnesium this and the stearate this, and how it can help minimize fine lines and it can absorb oil. And I was like, oh, you know what? That could be useful. So I really stopped thinking about makeup as like coverage, Hollywood, covering up stuff, but more intentional healing that has a bigger purpose. So now I've even started occasionally, I created my own foundation, powder foundation for myself, which I'm wearing right now, that, is my shade, but intentionally putting in things that help minimize lines and help do this and help do this. And so I'm like, okay, this is beauty on purpose, right? And so then even for my daughter, she doesn't need the minimizing the fine lines, the this and the that, but she might need something more intentional for the performance, just to help keep the oil down as the lights are shining on her, right? So I have something different for her. So I'm really like more marketing it as on purpose. I love that because that is actually what her name means. And so we've named the brand Nia. I love the course so much. I remember, I'll tell you the most frustrating thing about it, but in hindsight, I'm like, this is so important that they did it this way. Future modules are locked until you finish one. Because of course, I'm like, let's jump right into just formulating, right? And I remember watching the intro videos and they're like, we're going to take you through some theory first. I'm like, blah. And I love learning. Like I love research. I love writing. I love learning. But having dabbled with DIY, I just wanted to know how to do it right. So I wanted to jump to module 8. And I was like, I have to wait till module 8 to like start formulating something. But walking through all the intro stuff, I mean, I couldn't get through it fast enough. I was like, this is so interesting. And just, water soluble and oil soluble and understanding this. And I'm like, oh, that's why that DIY thing does not work. And I just found it interesting looking at some of the recipes that, while we don't measure in teaspoons, like all of that stuff was so important. So then by the time I got to even the raw ingredients in module 5, and then finally to being able to actually start formulating something in module 8, I felt very prepared. So I think that was actually a big highlight for me. I used to look at the back of ingredients, and if I couldn't recognize every word on there, then it was trash, right? It's garbage. Like, I don't want to see the word alcohol at all. And then I was like, hold on a little bit, right? Because things like cetyl alcohol and like these things are important, but I didn't understand what they were. So I think that's the other part that I'm like, that's a thickener. This is a solubilizer. And it just doesn't have a plant-based name, right? So for somebody who's like, I am only plant-based, right? Like if it doesn't say something that I recognize, I'm like, you got to toss it. And I'm like, no, that's actually not true. It's an alcohol and a sugar, and it's a fatty alcohol that's coming from an oil. I'm like, it's totally natural, but I didn't understand that. Having to walk through all of the theory and understand all of that first before I start formulating, then I could appreciate, okay, yeah, I need to order this, and this is not poison. Like this is not anything bad. This is totally natural. When I die, literally, it's on my tombstone. It has to say like, a DIYer at heart. I have a fundamental problem with paying for things that I can make myself. I mean, there's some stuff where it's like, okay, I can't make a couch, I can't make a refrigerator, but if I could, I totally would, right? It goes back to like what feels like a million years ago when I would, was always eating like yogurt, granola, and fruit, and I would buy the whole thing together. And I started looking at that one day, and I'm like, why am I paying this much money out of convenience, right? So then I just went and bought everything separate, and then I had it on my own. And that little things like that, like just that shift. And I think you can look at things like makeup and skincare and all this sort of stuff and be like, there's no way, right? Look at all these big top brands, like there's no way that I can do that. And when you can kind of learn how the sausage is made, if you will, it's quite empowering. And to go back to my friend at church who had mentioned, this tallow, this particular tallow, which again, like I said, became a benchmark product for me. And I looked at that, and she's paying a lot of money. Look at that, right? She's paying a lot of money for 4 ounces of this. And I looked at that and I was like, I made it for a fraction of the cost. And I understand markup. I understand that. I respect that. No judgment. But how empowering that I made that same thing for myself at a fraction of the cost, and I don't have to pay that, right? And so it's like, what else could I make? And so being able to make, my daughter's palette for her own, and like at a fraction of the cost, and I know exactly what's in it. There is just something quite empowering about that. And that's something I'm also trying to pass on to my girls. I'm like, look, if we can make it, we're going to do that first. And then if we can't, we'll buy it. Definitely purposeful, and I really love the idea of local. So to the extent that I can do local, so even my tallow, I do get locally from a local butcher shop. So I enjoy that, and I really am about sort of sustainable and like kind of repurposing. So this is the tallow face cream, and this is like in a little rose tin. And what I've done so far, and there's the cream, my local people that have this, they can just return this back to me and I'll recycle them and then reuse them. And then with the makeup, I'm thinking through intentionality. I guess that would be my other value, right? Another collection that I have created right now, I'm thinking through how can I allow people to get just what they need and not have the waste there. So, maybe having the colors individual, but suggesting collections, right? I'm suggesting that you get these 3, 4 because they were intended to go together. But if you only like 2 of those colors, then that's completely fine. I think that I even myself felt a little bit like overwhelmed at the prospect of starting something like this. And even still, sometimes I'm like, tell my husband, I'm like, okay, can I do this? Like, remind me again that I can sort of do this, and the thing that, we'll always kind of talk about is, one day at a time, sort of starting somewhere. And I think something that the school talks about from the very beginning is having that vision in mind and just holding on to that. So when I go out and I look at the benchmark products, it can feel like there's no way I can be like that brand or that brand. And then I kind of come back to center again. And I'm like, okay, I'm doing this for my daughter. I'm doing this for this 7-year-old. And this is what I'm making. And that does bring me back to my purpose. And not trying to fill as a space that is not mine to occupy. Right. So I think it's like having that very sort of clear vision, designing for that person and designing there and not getting caught up in like, oh, but I've got to fix this problem and this problem. And that for me, like when I start going down that way, then I'm like, I can't do this. I can't do this. But when I'm like kind of focused, then it doesn't feel as scary. I've actually just finished all of the modules and I'm working on finishing up the assignments. So, it's maybe been about 6 or 7 months now. So it took a good chunk of time to kind of get through. And I think in the beginning, like I said, I wanted to jump from, I wanted to skip right onto module 8 and just get to the good stuff. And then having to sit with the theory and to sit and to learn was very impactful. And so from a business standpoint, it's really opened up my eyes. It's like, okay, I can do this, right? I can create something that has meaning, that has intention, that has purpose, that I am capable of doing this. And it's humbling, right? As I'm in my she shed, as we call it, just a room off of our garage that I've done up as best as I can, that I'm like, okay, this is like where people start, and many people are starting in their basements or starting in their garages. And I think there's just something humbling about knowing that starting place. And I think the best way that I can kind of think about it, I think it's very easy to look at these companies that are just huge, right? And to think that they just began that way, right? But most of these people began in the garage just by themselves, them and their family, and then they've expanded. And to know that I'm at the start of that is quite amazing. And so when I began, it really was how do I make this thing better and not like a DIY blogger, right? And now it's how do I create a legacy that I can leave for my family, that I can leave for my children, that is something that they can grow into, that my girls can see, oh, well, if my mommy started a business from her garage, then I can totally do that. And I just think that is quite amazing that you have the tools, that it doesn't have to be a secret. And I think that's what they talk about all the time, right? They're just like, you can be a formulator, you can create some of these things. It just starts that in your mind that, well, if I can do this, like what else? Like what else is possible? Yeah, my target audience really right now is really dancers, and thinking about, my daughter who's 7, and I have a good friend who is actually a principal dancer at a local company here. So she is like at the top echelon of ballet. My daughter's just starting off. So I'm like, that's my range. So I'm even talking to, and she's used my skin cream. She's like, I love this stuff, which is very heartwarming. So I'm thinking through as my daughter grows to get to where this other dancer is, what are all the skin needs sort of in between, right? And so the vision for the brand is to kind of actually, in a fun way, kind of target it after sort of dancing terms, right? And so my daughter, she's right now in a studio, right? Because she's learning. This other dancer is in a company, right? And so in a company, you have your highest echelon, which is your principal dancer. Beneath that, you've got your first and second soloist, and then you have the actual sort of like ensemble, right? Which is all the dancers together. So I'm thinking about, creating products that are in line with those sort of tiers, because they really target how much more care your skin needs.